Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone to this webinar today, where we'll be covering you're not managing SaaS, SaaS is managing you. The CIOs playbook for mastering agentic AI, governance, and digital control. It's a really exciting time today. I'm joined by some amazing people. I have Christine, who would introduce herself, but she was Senior Vice President and CIO Advisory at SAP. Myself, Lee Martin, I'm one of the Senior Directors of Product Management within Flexera, looking after everything to do with SaaS management. And we're also joined by Max through a video of our Cloud Transformation Manager at Addresso. So what we're going to do is I'm going to kickstart off today with an intro from Max, and then we're going to go into a little bit from myself, a little bit from Christine, and then we'll jump into Q&A. If any of you got any questions, chuck them into the chat and we'll try and address them towards the end of the presentation. We have booked about an hour, but it probably won't take the whole hour. So we'll see how it goes, depends on Q&A, but please be as interactive as you can. So let's kickstart off with Max.
Hi, my name is Max and I'm a Cloud Transformation Manager at Adesso. And today I have the pleasure to share my FinOps point of view about software as a service. The spend for software as a service has reached for 34% of the organizations already more than $1 million per month. So far, so good. But the problem is that up to 24% of it is waste. And this problem is becoming bigger and it's expected to grow over the next years. This is exactly what we have seen in infrastructure and platform as a service in the past already. The reasons may differ. As for infrastructure and platform as a service, it was mainly regarding missing knowledge of how to make use of these technologies. For software as a service, I see two main reasons. The first one, when I think back on the first projects for cost optimization, we always have tried to work a way around software as a service and licensing, as it was far too complex to include it in the standard frameworks. And the second one, software as a service is gaining a lot of fans and desires, especially with new AI features that software has provided. So employees start to make use of it even without thinking about governance and compliance in the organization. So even the FinOps framework have started to include it into their framework, as reports have shown that FinOps responsible teams has been taking care of it, including licensing as well. So there is already a way possible to master it, and this is exactly why you're here. You want to master it and bring it to a higher maturity level, and this is why you get some more insights and a good playbook by Leith and Christine how to master it. Enjoy the session.
Thanks, Max. So let me just reshare my presentation. Okay, excellent. So thanks again. What I'm going to be covering today around FinOps and SaaS is reality of the explosion of AI. And I'm sure you're like, oh no, not another AI presentation. But the reality is we've got to face it. There are challenges here today that aren't going away. And, we're going to talk about how we're going to embrace it, because if we don't embrace it, our users are going to embrace it, or they're going to find ways around IT, or, they're going to use their phone. They're going to use some other device to get access to it if you're blocking and stopping it. So, stopping innovation is a challenge, and our users are smart, and they're gonna find ways of doing it. Now, let's talk a little bit about how that's going to affect us and how we're seeing it at Flexera, and how that really is impacting all of our customers and the vendors actually as well. So to start off with, the world of FinOps, IaaS and PaaS and all the ASs is kind of a visible spend. There's a framework, FinOps Foundation have done some great work by laying some work that basically says, hey, look, you must adopt this focus framework, or you must adopt this kind of way of presenting the cost of data. So you get visibility into how much you're spending. And you get visibility on, the costs moving between data centers or moving between CPUs. So there's a layer of visibility, and there's still some challenges there. Now, what's happening underneath is that SaaS spend is basically exploding, where there's a convergence between IaaS and SaaS. There are vendors out there that kind of sit in the middle of that road. And sometimes what you'll see is you've got a SaaS subscription, and that SaaS subscription is tootling along, but underneath that is consumption cost. So you're actually being charged maybe for what we're calling secondary metrics, right? You've got a primary metric, which is your monthly fee, and you might have a fee for the compute consumption. But what we're seeing is these additional metrics that are coming in saying, hey, don't worry, you know, we'll sell you the service. It costs this amount of money. You're like, great, and I'm gonna be on this tier. But if you want to use this next new cool feature that we've released, well, that's in next tier, and it is a secondary metric to cost to it. So what we're seeing is this invisible usage. We're also seeing a lot of applications that cross over their use and their need. And the big thing is that our users are struggling to understand not spend, but use. So let's talk a little bit about that. When we see SaaS overall, the expanding frontier in FinOps, and you know, it's been quite a boom, the FinOps space, the industry, and everything that's going on, and it's really actually helped the overall, what I would call the ITAM industry and the software asset management industry, kind of get recognition on where the value is. But in essence, we're seeing that SaaS spend is naturally totally taking over compared to where on-premise spend is being. And we're actually seeing SaaS spend taking over some of the where FinOps costs would be. You know, desktop versus data center used to be the words, but when I see people talking about XYZ vendor costing millions and millions of pounds per year, the risk really starts to become a problem. So SaaS now represents a major slice of IT. You know, it's one of the biggest costs, or I could say investments, that people are making today to understand what's going on. Traditional cloud cost tools don't often see any SaaS. You know, they won't see software, they won't see shadow IT. It's really hard to see contract duplicity or contract waste. And overall, when we look at what SaaS management is doing, there is a requirement to actually look at how much you're spending on all of your software, whether it be in the data center, where IaaS or PaaS, and I'm going to call it the end user compute spectrum. You know, people using Adobe, using Miro, using Figma. There's this new blend of what I'm calling offshore compute, where you could say, hey, I'm using a piece of software, but I want to send it to the cloud because maybe I'm not running a really powerful computer and I want it to compute over there. But the vendors then start charging you for this. So overall, we're seeing this massive shift in the industry. And when agentic AI starts to come through in its droves, you're really going to start to see this change. Just look at Copilot as an example. Copilot is a fantastic add-on. I don't think I could live without Copilot today. No advert for Microsoft, I'm sorry, but that's the one that I use. But in essence, this tool comes with my E5, right? You know, I've added it on, we've added it to our users, which is great. But you know, some of our users don't have this functionality, don't have this technology, and they want it. So then we have to uplift them to a new program. And now they've also got the Copilot Studio, where you can create these agentic bots that do things for you. But if you use them commercially or you're using them in a different manner, there is a cost metric for it, and it's really hard to track. It's almost like a hidden cost. Now, Microsoft have a good process for it, but they don't necessarily show you all the data. It's actually really hard to pull this usage data to understand where this spend is. Now, I'd love to paint Microsoft as this big evil doom kind of company, but that's not true. You know, everyone kind of slants on different organizations. The reality is all organizations are kind of starting to do this. And this is because we're having to push innovation. So SaaS vendors, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Datadog, PagerDuty, Databricks, Adobe, you know, Miro, Figma, all of them are starting to add what we're calling consumption-based models, where as a secondary metric. So especially in AI, analytics, agentic AI, you know, reducing workflows, and all of that comes in as additional pricing. So there may be the additional pricing could actually be based on individual users. A good example, Firefly. If I'm generating a video in that, if I generate it in 720p only costs me a small amount of credits per call, right? It could cost me 10 credits per second, 100 credits per second. And then when I go to 4K, all of a sudden it's using 200 credits per second, and I've only got 5 or 10,000 credits. I'm burning them really quickly. So we're seeing these hybrid models that are starting to come up. So the biggest challenge that we see is there's a lack of transparency around vendors. They're not giving clear pricing models. They're not giving clear articulation of what's being spent. Some of the vendors that I've talked about already today who are charging for a secondary metric where they'll say, hey, look, if you go to our highest tier, we'll give you 100 credits per month. And then you log into the portal and you're like, okay, well, how many credits have I used? And it says, this feature is coming soon. And you're like, okay, so you're charging me for more credits. I have no idea of my consumption value. How do I know whether I need more? Well, the user gets stops and it says, oh, you can request more from this magic button. Maybe it comes from a pool, or maybe you can actually automatically purchase them through your subscription. Now, this can be governed at a high level by the business if you've invested into this. But what we're seeing is pockets of business, let's say the marketing department or sales department, buying their own solution, whether it be by credit card or through their own kind of P&L. And then they're tripping it up and keep going more and more. Now, centralizing this cost is really, really important to say we want to go and buy this as an organization rather than buy this as a department or a business sector. Integration is really important because consumption metrics may span multiple models or services. Like I said, it could be AI plus transaction. It could be AI plus how you're using it based on the actual model you're using, whether you're using 4.1 or 4.5. There's quite often vendor lock-in, so it will say, right, if you want to buy the best tier, or you want to use 120,000 credits, that's only available in the best tier if you subscribe for a whole year or 3 years. So you can end up locked in. And what we want to be careful is user lock-in as well, like named user lock-in versus organization lock-in. So if you're buying individually, you could end up with a limited license versus a corporate license. So overall risk for the organization is large where it comes to overages, where you've bought too much, or even underage, and expected usage can disrupt everything. Now, I've got some examples on the screen. I've picked some vendors, some of them you may recognize here, but they've added some additional metrics where you could say, hey, if you go to the ultimate package, you get 35 credits. That's only £237 per user per month. But their basic package is like $17. So there's a really nice entry fee, but realistically, you find yourself very limited and you're getting users asking for higher tier subscriptions all the time. And then they what's called cross bundling, where they'll bundle extra features in the higher tier packages that you don't actually need. If you remember a long time ago, a lot of vendors used to sell off bundles and you get loads of software, you don't need half of it. And it's like, well, why should I do that? And then niche vendors come out with singular solutions at different prices. If we look across the board, people like, I've got some screenshots here, you can see clearly Miro have introduced a new 100 credits per month at their highest tier. Fantastic new functionality that they brought in, but which users need it? And the big question is which users are consuming it. So one problem is there's this new metric. The second challenge is how do I track consumption? And how do I track adoption? Because consumption is one thing. Consumption is like how much am I using and how much am I spending? But then sometimes you might want to go, right, okay, we've invested as a company into Copilot or ChatGPT or Grok or whatever it is your chosen AI. How do I track people are using it? Then how do I track people are using it efficiently? How do I make sure Christine isn't burning 4K videos every 5 seconds of her children instead of the business outcome? Well, that might not be a problem. Maybe got good ethics there. But maybe she's using it on sample videos instead of on the production videos, and not using them in the right method, right? So a lot of education is clear that we're going to need to be able to do, because it's basically this is like a toy in a toolbox. Anyway, so this is a major challenge that's going on in the industry. So shadow IT is totally evolving. These people, these logos already. I mean, I'm a consumer of AI. I currently use Copilot and Gemini and Grok, all three in a single day. Like they're my ones that I like using. And then occasionally, oh, let's try this other one, right? For whatever reason. So I'm consuming multiple ones of these. And my business focuses on a singular one. We're all in a single vendor. But there are requirements to use other tools and other technologies because of their benefits. But if you don't know people are using them, then you're maybe not got the most efficient contract. So having that visibility, obviously we have our software rolled out. It detects everything that's in your environment that's being used from a shadow SaaS perspective through the browser. And it can see and say, hey, look, these are all the tools that are being used, which informs IT and informs the SAM teams around how they should invest. Now, compliance risk is a problem. So regulations and frameworks around reporting AI usage and risk mitigation is at two parts. The businesses need to report in it, and from a regulatory perspective, and the business needs to report on it from a cost perspective. So overall, SaaS management's roles, SaaS managers' roles are to discover everything that's out there. They want to track AI visibility, and they really want to identify potential governance gaps and traps. We talk a little bit about often in businesses challenges around data sovereignty, understanding where costs are going, so cost center allocation and understanding. And we're often talking about how this is, getting visibility of that. So one of the things that we really try to understand is where is all the risk and the waste happening, right? So 46% of IT leaders said managing security of SaaS applications was their top concern. I hear this all the time: security, security, security. But when managing SaaS apps and AI apps, the list of and other concerning apps, the first gap is visibility, right? You cannot manage what you can't see. I still don't know who said that quote, but they are obviously very smart. But you cannot manage them. And if you can't see them, how are you enforcing these rules? How are you ensuring security? How are you making sure you're protecting your business and protecting your users? As we see here, 23% generative AI apps. Are they being used for work? Are they being used for business? I don't know, don't care. But what data is going into them? Is IP being shared? And then the next question is, when we've actually invested into them, are they being used efficiently? Open source apps, we know this is a big area. Great innovation comes from open source apps. And then we have things like file sharing apps. And I'm not talking about torrents. I'm talking about, you've got Dropbox, and you've got OneDrive, and you've got Box, and you've got WeTransfer. And the question is, why do you have 5 file sharing apps? The reality often comes is that there's different rules. The marketing department are sharing 2 gigabyte files. So OneDrive's not really working for them because of the corporate limitations. So they're going off and they're using a third-party tool to share it via the internet, which is, maybe not secure. So this is where security comes in real time. We see a big implementation of things like CASBs and SASEs that have a surface level view of this data. Now we can bring in all that data from CASBs and other sources, things like that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But their focus is on security, not necessarily SaaS discovery. So IT leaders surveyed found that 1/3 of their SaaS spending is underutilized and completely unused overall. So again, I talk about adoption. Adoption, once you've got that visibility, you then worry about, okay, what should we remove? Okay, I've removed all my risky apps. And then you go, right, okay, we've invested into Copilot. How many people are actually using it? So these are the big questions that we often end up having. Now, us at Flexera, what we try to do is help close that gap. So when we look at the industries, we have a universal connector. Now, ideally, what this will do is help you understand bringing in all of those. There's over 25,000 business SaaS apps. There's hundreds of thousands of SaaS apps, but not necessarily the businesses care about the non-business ones. And we want to bring that data in to be able to manage it. And every vendor has a different API, and not all APIs are made equal. So the good news is a lot of organizations use single sign-on to tunnel everyone through. The bad news about single sign-on is, in essence, that's the known knowns. Okay, it's got no unknowns in there. It's just the known knowns. They're the governed ones, and you can get logins from that, but you can't get usage. So you can see how many times people are logging in, logging out, maybe. CASB, as we talked about, that's the firewall level or the perimeter and the proxy level, where you're seeing what domains people are logging in, but often you can't tell the difference between someone logging into Jira or Confluence because they log into Atlassian. So you often end up with these gaps. We had this great investigation where we saw about Adobe. When you go to a CASB, I posted it on LinkedIn a while ago, but it only picked up about 14 of the applications that Adobe are using. If you have Creative Cloud, you have 63 applications that only sees 14. So the other answer is you jump into the APIs. You can see we have it connected to the APIs. The APIs is only bringing through 12. 3 additional ones that weren't found from the CASBs, but overall I'm nowhere near the total number. So how do we plug that gap? Well, we have something called the browser extension. I'm jotting around here, but the browser extension then found the remaining count, seeing all the remaining 60 plus. Because they're being used at the browser level, it can see that Firefly is being used, Animate is being used, Express is being used, because they're not going through the API, they're not going through the CASB because it's just Adobe portal, but the browser can see you using it. So if you're doing a competitive comparison about moving between apps, or you're trying to downsize or right size someone's licensing, it's a real challenge because you need to understand how much are they consuming of this bundle. I talked about bundles earlier. These bundles are complex. They're designed to hook you in. So really moving from, I don't know, Acrobat to Nitro is probably a really hard decision if it's bundled in with Photoshop and it's bundled in with Illustrator, right? So we have these challenges, but it might be more cost efficient to move to something else across the business. We often find vendors' APIs are really bad. I won't mention any names on this, but there are definitely some big vendors that have really bad APIs. I don't know if it's deliberate, but we often then have to run a report from the actual portal or from the actual tool, like to run a user's report. That's a CSV file and upload that into our systems to get this delta data. Financial discovery is pretty cool, but it has massive gaps. It has no idea about usage, none at all. It doesn't understand, how would it know? But I could tap into my Coupa or Concur or whatever system you're using to manage your ERP or your expenses and see who's purchased something or possibly purchased something. Maybe it's a PO rather than an invoice. So that gives you an indication of like possible risk, but does not help with usage or adoption at all. Then you've got what we often found over the years, agent-based. Again, another example, I use Adobe because it's an easy one. A lot of stuff is installed onto a computer. So tracking whether it's being used or not used, you need to have something on the machine saying, yeah, it's being used. I mean, obviously you could use SCCM or Intune or whatever else there is to track that, but you need something on the machine. And we see this with what's called hybrid apps or SaaS authenticated applications, which basically mean they're not really a SaaS app or SaaS powered applications. They're kind of using your PC and they call to the internet to either authenticate or empower them. And again, mentioned the browser extension. Now, with all of this, when you're looking at SaaS and you're looking at FinOps and you're looking at on-prem licensing, so ITAM, FinOps, and SaaS, realistically, you need a lens in the middle. You can't just focus on one domain. So if you've come here today to learn about FinOps or just to learn about SaaS, there's not one thing. You need to become not a master of both, but you need to be aware of both. So that's overall like how I wanted to introduce the session. What we're going to do is going to move over to Christine. I'm going to go through the CIO perspective and some of the areas that I've just discussed. And yeah, I'll hand over to Christine. So Christine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lee. And also from my side, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Let's shift gears, as you said, look at this from a CIO perspective, because that is very important from my perspective again. The pattern we are seeing is remarkably consistent across all industries. So whether you're coming from automotive or from even being an own software vendor, right? We all see the same pattern. First, let me introduce myself. I am exactly coming from a software vendor, being with SAP, but more importantly, I'm also advising and supervising CIOs and boards with my different roles which I had in the past. At SAP, I was the last couple of years responsible for strategic central services, which means I was taking care of the IT strategy and transformation, but also for cybersecurity, strategic partner management, and software asset management. And software asset management, yes, SaaS, we were talking about it, you were talking about it. The SaaS is a very simple way, right? And it was a very simple way in the past, and it is still to enable work in our organizations, in our businesses. It's a faster deployment, it's more flexible, you can lower your costs. So yes, we see that increase of SaaS spend, but it comes because of the fact that we are outsourcing our CapEx spend to an OpEx side, right? So that is very positive on the one hand side, but on the other hand side, it also changes and shapes how organizations operate, how they make decisions, and how they spend money, right? And as you rightly said, Lee, it happens potentially often without the CIO even being aware of it, or without being this IT organization aware of it. And that is why this topic also matters a lot for me, because it's not just a technology discussion. Yes, technology, SaaS, AI agents, all the nice things, but it's also a leadership challenge. It's a leadership challenge for the IT organization, for the CIOs and the leadership team, because at the end, we as an IT organization, we are asked to stay in control for the businesses, right? For the whole corporate. We are asked when something is not working, IT is called. Regardless if it is the beamer light is not working, it's IT. Is it not the wireless line is not working, it's IT. And even more, if the software is not working, it's somehow IT, even if you as a business were the only one who knows that you are using that software. So at the end, it's really that we as CIOs or the CIO and the IT organizations needs to stay in control. And that is why I would not say we have a technology problem. We do have tons of other challenges in our daily lives, and including that the IT and the CIO role shifts from not anymore managing tools or a tool set, but to orchestrating those intelligent ecosystems, because we are not in big corporate, we are not potentially able to really control in a more negative sense, control everything, but we as IT, we should be able to enable and orchestrate and govern these ecosystems, where SaaS, AI, cloud, APIs, agents, where everything is coming together and ideally based on data which are consistent in the whole corporate environment. And that's what the talk is about, how we regain control, how we create transparency for our businesses, how we are building an operating model which exactly enables that usage of AI-driven productivity, and which enables also that usage of this new technology advancements which we are seeing now in a speed or in a pace which is not seen for many, many years. So let's start with the reality check on the next slide. And I guess you hopefully confirm that, well, unfortunately confirm that, that reality check, because we see that across all reports, you see it in all the big reports, and if you go to LinkedIn, obviously they are talking a lot about it. Flexera, yes, Gartner, Bain, IBM, MIT, it's extremely consistent in all these things, rising costs due, I would say, uncontrolled SaaS and AI consumptions. We heard about it. 73% of CIOs expect IT costs to rise. Well, that's nice. Oh, no, that's not nice, especially if you're talking from a board perspective. That's not nice if the IT costs are increasing and increasing. On the other hand side, we do have that tremendous demand from business, right? It's not that the CIO is starting in the morning and saying, well, now I would like to spend some more millions. It's because also the businesses see so much potential productivity gains and are asking for those new technologies, new applications, and new business supporting tools, right? At the end, it's all about having also the centralized inventory, because Yuli also we're talking about it. Sometimes marketing is using that tool, sales is using another tool, although it might be the same functions behind it, but it's just because there's little tiny different functions in a very specific way, or it's even more because of the people are not talking to each other. And then IT should come in ideally to help the business enable that, or help the business to talk to each other and help the enterprise architecture to become more consistent. But for that, it would mean we would have to know it. And that's a visibility gap, which I would also say it's very important, and you might confirm that 2 out of 3 organizations lack that complete inventory, that centralized view of their contracts, of their SaaS contracts, of their usage, right? And Lee, you have even more figures in it. The number is super brutal, but it's exactly what we are experiencing. What I see when I'm talking to the different CIOs in my role, it's exactly what 2 out of 3, or even every CIO is confirming, we are lacking the complete inventory, or we are lacking the complete centralized transparency and centralized view on it. And now, while SaaS is the fastest growing spend category, at the same time, it's the least governed sometimes in the company, right? For sure, some SaaS vendors or vendors for sure are not, potentially are also supporting that if they are reaching out to different business departments in a corporate organization. And I would say only smaller vendors are doing it. The big ones are very consistent in that, talking to the IT organization and so on. But it is not that we should blame the SaaS vendors for it, right? At the end, it's creating duplicates, it's creating shadow IT, it's creating shelfware, it's creating uncontrolled AI add-ons, everything, but mainly because of missing governance and missing leadership and missing presence of the IT organization in the business. If the business knows that the IT, the CIO, the IT leaders are my strategic enabler, my trusted partner, if I'm in the business, for sure, I would first, if I get a nice vendor email, for sure, I would first talk to my IT partner. But if the IT organization is not seen as the strategic enabler, the trusted business partner, then yes, for sure, I think I can do it by myself, and I talk to the vendor directly. So it's a governance question and a leadership question, which I mentioned already. Finally, and we see that also here on the slide, only 27% of CIOs says that they are governed in a model rather than in silos. Yes, think about that for a moment. I mean, that all comes together. All the figures are complementing each other. AI usage is happening in SaaS tools. SaaS is running in the cloud because it is SaaS. Cloud triggers consumption costs. Nobody is tracking it. Nobody potentially is knowing it. And yet the governance is split across multiple departments. It's in procurement because your procurement officer hopefully is signing the deal. You have potentially an IT asset management. Yes, great. You have a security CISO organization. Yes, they are also looking on it. You have cloud ops, individual business units, but no single owner, no single view, no single accountability, unless you have an IT organization which is really seen as a strategic partner and business enabler. So the message is very simple. Technology is not the blocker from my perspective. It's a lack of visibility. It's a lack of ownership. And that is why those figures are, I would say, seen across all the different records and reports. But on the one hand side, these figures tell only the half story, because, and that is coming on the next slide, the real opportunity or the real challenge, it's also an opportunity, right? But the real challenge is in the fastest growing blind spot. And you see that on the next slide. We are really seeing in those recent surveys, and I just came across such a nice survey from, I think last week I saw it first time. It's where we see that 67%, and it's on the next slide, I don't see the next slide on my screen yet, but 67% of employees in Germany, and the number for globally is not as high, but also not so much lower. These employees are now using AI tools without employer approval. And we are talking about it. You have Claude, you have ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. What else you have, right? Everything you can access somehow, even if you as an employee, if your IT department is not blocking those pages, you can access all these pages, and that is happening, right? It's becoming the norm somehow. It's not longer the exception that people are using those tools. They are really actively using it, and it's not because of the fact that they are want to harm their corporate. No, definitely. First of all, I always think of the good in every human and every employee. But it's happening outside the formal IT governance because it's so easy to access. It's through browser access, through plugins. It's embedded, right? Partially, employees could potentially even do not realize that they are doing something directly without official approval of the corporate governance and IT organization, right? So they are uploading documents, they are testing it out, they are trying tools, which is first of all also great, but they are integrating, step by step, integrating AI workflows long before the IT becomes aware of it, because they are testing it up front. And now comes the biggest challenge, and Lee, you mentioned it as well, AI credits question, contract duplicity. We're also talking about the question of these unmanaged cybersecurity issues, right? And that is really, really a big thing. The risk exposure that grows silently with every access out of your organization towards such tools which are not potentially governed securely and managed securely. So employees, and that happens, employees are uploading confidential documents. They are using without a proper license. They are using it on a private license potentially. And so on, we can talk about that for hours. Again, they are even potentially not aware of it, and they don't want to harm the business, but they are doing it because it's faster, it's intuitive, it's easy to use, and shadow IT, without shadow IT, is growing super exponential. It's more risky, and with that, it's also clear that the complication is there, that AI adoption is happening outside of governance frameworks, it's happening outside of security frameworks, and it's accelerating super strong and on a heavy speed. What does that mean for us as a CIO or for IT leaders? It means that we not should, I mean, for sure we have to, on the cybersecurity side, we for sure have to look on those malicious behavior, but it's at the end that people want to get their work done, right? They want to have easier tools. They want to test them out. They might switch because they are not ready for their usage right now or for their business. But at the end, they are somehow asking for support, although they are not speaking it out, but they are asking for support from an IT organization. And we as an IT leader, as CIOs, we should be there, again, to be the strategic enabler and to be the trusted partner. So the good news is we actually can gain back that control, and we can gain back that trust from our business organizations or from our employees. But it's obviously not with the same old model of the past. We need to also rethink that operating model, how IT organizations are working, and how those operating models, which potentially in portions worked well in the past, how they can be adapted for the future. And that is what I would like to call out. That is on the next slide, the core CIO priority now for the AI area and for every CIO, to think about an operating model which brings together the FinOps, the SaaS ops, the AI ops, and which comes together as a full IT strategy for your organization. And let me start off with that first absolutely important layer or topic. And we heard it already, you cannot manage what you cannot measure or what you are not knowing, right? It's instead of having separate playbooks, we need to have that combined framework, and that needs to be based on a unified visibility layer. If you do not have that, if you're not making that first step right, that one source of truth, then you cannot govern anymore those different silos. And again, you cannot govern that technology and that what's happening outside there. So you need to bring that together. So that single visibility layer needs to be the base, needs to be the place where the AI usage, shadow AI, SaaS, your enterprise architecture, you need to have that all together and you need to see it, right? Ideally, for sure, with an overview where everything is coming in, because only then you can assign in a second step that clear ownership and accountability to see that every service, every SaaS tool, AI agent, platform, system, application, you name it, right? That every service, every item there has a budget owner, has a technology owner, a technical owner, a contact, right? You have to have a risk owner, and more importantly, you have that business owner who stands up to say, yes, that is my primary usage, my primary technology for that business topics. What matters is someone owns it, and that fully, right? So doesn't matter where it sits. It doesn't matter if it is finance, IT, business, marketing, sales, whatever, but you need to have someone who owns it and who feels responsible for it. And when you have that in the third step, you can fund AI with AI. For sure, and now remembering, right, every year budgets, IT budgets are asked to be rising, right? They are rising somehow. For sure, software vendors partially increasing prices, but even more businesses are asking for more, right? And if you're being a strategic enabler already, then you unfortunately have that success of being even more asked to deliver more. But at the end, it's not helpful if then the CIO is just coming back to the board and asking, hey, I need some little more budgets, right? Yes, there are some multi-year heavy investment requirements and heavy investment needs. And yes, for sure, you should ask for those. But you as a CIO or IT leader, you always have also opportunities to fund by optimizing your IT organization and by optimizing your operating model by yourself. So AI automation is a perfect possibility for you to fund new innovations, fund AI with AI, right? You find SaaS ops efficiencies, where you can find also then savings just by seeing, okay, we have 5 different contracts with that specific vendor in that country, in that region, in that business LOB, in that other lines of business or other area. Just think about how you can stand up to combine that buying power, to combine all these different contracts and go to your vendor and say, we do not want to have 5 contracts anymore, we only want to have 1, and that combining that is then your buying power and your savings, which you can take out to invest further in other areas. So fund AI with AI. Don't come always back to the board and say, well, I need more money. Think about very creative, and there are possibilities out there to fund and to optimize your own budget so that AI becomes somehow self-funded. And that brings me finally to the 4th point, which is that architecture, which you need to have in order to enable AI at scale. It's, yes, cloud modernization. We are talking about that for years. it's the data foundation you are requiring, unless you want to have the full counts in your organization. It's the API first design which you need to have. You need to have your enterprise architecture ready for that in order to become the runway also for those new AI agents across the organizations. So combining those 4 elements in one strategy, in one CIO strategy, communicating that to your business partners, trusting or providing them the trust that you are the strategic enabler, putting your measurements and your actions behind it, that is where I see where CIOs can shift from a reactive SaaS management to a real strategic SaaS leadership and AI leadership in the current terms. But let me close before we then come to the Q&A, right? If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's about transparency and visibility. Visibility is not a luxury anymore. For CIOs, for the IT organizations, but even more for the businesses, it's the first layer of governance. Without that unified visibility, without transparency of what's going on, where you do have your technologies sitting, where you do have your business requirements, if that is not there, AI and SaaS and whatever cannot be governed anymore. SaaS cannot be optimized, your costs cannot be optimized, and your budgets cannot be controlled. So with that, let's move into the discussion, because I'm sure you have some questions or you are seeing these patterns in your organizations, and I'm eager to hear and provide also from my perspective some more guidance. Lee.
Thanks, Christine. So yeah, we're moving to Q&A. If you do have questions, just chuck them in the chat and we'll happily go through them. Obviously, not every day do you get to speak to a CIO or CIO advisor, so I do, please bring some questions in. I brought my own questions, of course, to bring to Christine, so this will be interesting, but I'll bring them up on the screen so it's nice and easy. But what's your, just in a short summary, but has SaaS made deployment of software easier, or deployment, or has it made it worse? Is it more chaotic? How are you feeling, it's affected you as in a CIO capacity?
Let me state that really, regardless of my employer or regardless of my role at an SAP, being at SAP or being at a software vendor, really personally, I'm super excited of what's going on in the technology space, and I'm absolutely confident that SaaS makes deployment easier. But deployment is not longer the problem, right? You were talking about it as well. It's adoption, it's consumption. The problem is everything what happens after deployment. Usage, applications, shadow tools, consumption-based AI, add-ons, whatever, right? So it's not the deployment at the end. Yes, deployment is easier, but more the question about what's happening then. And it's not that I would say CIOs need now faster deployment, because deployment is super fast, but they need to have a structured lifecycle governance. And what I also do very often see is, hey, yeah, we deployed another tool. Yeah, we have that tool, but where is the retirement of tools? Where do you shut down things? Where do you shut down the infrastructure on-premise, whatever, right? But even also on the SaaS side, where do you retire systems and infrastructures and SaaS solutions if you do not need them anymore? And that is, again, the full life cycle, and that needs governance.
I think the challenge we often find is, I used to be an IT manager, and I remember the old days where I would lock down computers, like you lock down the CD drive, lock down the USB ports, right? No one could do anything. IT police, like kind of world, right? And now it's total opposite, right? If anything's locked down, you're gonna, my camera won't work, my home computer won't work. You have to have this open world, so people are able to deploy, software, buy it through credit cards. They can do whatever they want. But like you said, yeah, the understanding of visibility of that and being able to consolidate those costs is is super important, right? So I definitely think the world has changed a lot, and I think, you know, when we look at it today, it's phones has changed a lot of this. People are used to just downloading apps, right? You know, we took that away from them. There'd be side loading, right? I know for a fact as soon as something got blocked, I'm loading it on my own personal phone and I'm doing it here. So, and that's not practical, right? So I think this ties into that point from a CIO is really you don't want to stop you don't want to stop your users innovating, do you?
Yes.
So yeah. So I mean, we talked this about it a little bit here. You talked a little bit about ownership. So the big question is, are SaaS platforms making decisions for you? And is that a risk and opportunity? Because some of these IaaS SaaS vendors and PaaS vendors or whatever have AI and technology that go, don't worry, when your server's not being used, we'll shut it down. Or when this person's no longer use it, we're going to take the software away. You know, or we're going to deploy it through an agentic AI request in Slack, where someone says, I really need some Photoshop shopping software, and it gives them Photoshop instead of, I don't know, something cheaper. So what's your thoughts around the automated decision making that's coming into SaaS, or not, but our world?
Yeah, I mean, they are making decisions, right? SaaS are able or enabled to make decisions, and exactly what you said, right? From automated license assignments to AI-driven recommendations. If you're asking something and the AI is thinking with you, more or less, at the end it's an LLM, but there is both happening, and this is also, from my perspective, exactly that. It's both a risk and an opportunity. But the opportunity is for sure speed, right? I mean, the risk is that decisions happens outside of your governance model, yes, but the opportunity is you're getting your business much faster, much more productive with that risk which comes across. But at the end, it's again coming back to the key question. It's not about stopping automated decisions because it's making the lives easier, but it's to make them transparent and accountable, right? And that is where, again, IT and business needs to work together to make sure that this is, yes, automated decision, but with a transparency behind it, with an accountability behind it, and the opportunity also to revise those decisions. So at the end, it's both risk and opportunity, and
I think
always you can manage both.
Yeah, I think in the world of agentic AI, where it's going to be, you know, you've got agents sitting there making decisions. I think the governance models that we need to put in place as businesses, you know, a lot of people who are just consumers of this technology think it's just doing it on their own. But you know, you have to put in guardrails, right? That say don't go left, you know, only go right, go up, go down. Like you have to keep them within. They're not kind of just infinitesimal. So I think that's a big challenge, right? So, what do you think that in the CIO's role is changing or turning in the form of AI from a siloed experiment that's happening? You know, we know most organizations seem to have dev teams now. That wasn't the case back in the day, right? But they've all got a little dev team doing stuff, and they're experimenting and trying stuff. Moving to that you talked about it earlier, how to make your business company-wide productive. How does a CIO help organizations embrace it a little bit, I would say, and not be fearful of it? How do you think you help organizations in this way?
From my perspective, CIOs don't scale AI by just putting more and building more pilots, right? I mean, tons of ideas are out there, which is great, but the CIO's role shouldn't be to exactly bring all these tons of ideas and building more pilots every day, a new pilot. CIOs can really scale AI by creating the environment where pilots become products, right? We see low code, no code. We see so much business appetite to do something by themselves. The CIO role becomes then more the integrator, not the owner of every AI use case. It's not the, again, we talk at SAP, we always talk, we have hundreds of thousands of CIOs in SAP because we have hundreds of thousands of employees which are very smart and very technology affine. So at the end, that could happen to other companies for sure as well. And CIO's role needs to be then not owning every AI use case, because there are so many, but owning and being the creator of the conditions where those AI use cases, or that makes those AI use cases safe, scalable, cost efficient, compliant, and again, cost efficient and compliant in both terms. Because again, that is the basic for everything. And at the end, if something goes wrong, if there is a cybersecurity incident, we anyway call the CIO and the CISO to make things working again, right? And that is we really are not allowed to underestimate the cybersecurity topic of it. But that is a full other webinar, I would say, to talk about cybersecurity challenges, which comes across.
I think we basically covered this question in your previous answer, really, right? But it's CIOs can't really enforce governance. Yeah. You don't want to stifle innovation in your business, right? But where things are decentralizing, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what we were talking about earlier is visibility is that key identification, right? You want to know who's using what and where. How important is that ability to allow organizations to I don't know, sort themselves out, and then you kind of react to it? What's your thoughts on that, just briefly?
Yeah, so very briefly, again, you do it by, you can enforce governance, and enforce a little bit negative, but you do it by moving it from control by restriction to control by enablement, right? With that, governance becomes very lightweight and embedded. It's not because you have to name it governance, it's just because it's embedded. You can, with that, also accelerate innovations and not the other way around, from my perspective. And when you combine that with a real trusted enabler and seeing the CIO as that, again, I repeat myself, as a strategic enabler and trusted partner, if you see that IT organization in your business, then yeah, governance is not a control, but an enabler.
Okay, so we got just one question from the audience I'd like to address just quickly. It says, what is Flexera one's answer for SaaS governance need? I think from my perspective, governance needs we start off with visibility. That's our answer, where you just getting visibility for all of the applications that are out there. Putting controls in place isn't something that Flexera one focuses on. We're not about control and dominion. We're more about visibility and management. Other technologies are there to kind of handle that kind of control aspects. When it comes to certain technologies like FinOps, we do offer a level of governance to, like I say, spin up, spin down, and rules and policies. But a lot of control there, because that is immediate cost and impact. But other ones that affect end users, we generally let the businesses manage those and go throughout. So I've got about 30 seconds left in this presentation. So I'm just going to skip the last question, if that's okay, Christine. But what I wanted to do is just to remind everyone, we do have 2 links here. I'll chuck them in the chat now as well, and you can find them on, we'll put them on LinkedIn as well. But these are links to the IT priorities report, which is basically a lot of the data we cover today. And I've also got a SaaS management playbook, which will cover that question that we had in the chat as well, and a few other questions that came through, which I somehow didn't have time to cover. But yeah, thank you, Christine, and thank you everyone for turning up today. I think it's been a great session. We actually did the hour, which I'm sorry for, or happy for at the same time.
Super. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you, Flexera, also from my side. Yeah, it's great wave which we are riding right now, where we can create a lot of value, and I'm very much looking forward to connect with you afterwards and in the next weeks and months. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Take care.
Take care. Bye.